All right, my friend. We're on episode 16 of the Park It podcast. My buddy John, you want the last name or you want the full government?
Throw it out there, man. Let them know. They'll
Yeah,
find
my
me
buddy
one way or another.
John Dykeman of Rutgers rugby fame.
I wore the shirt
Nice.
in honor of it. So,
I got the old Scarlet one today.
there you go. Good for you.
Man. Yeah, man. It's been some time. I say that to almost everybody on my podcast, but it has been some time, dude.
I don't know if I got the record or not, but yeah, I figured I graduated 2010. I probably caught up with yet a few things, alumni stuff after that, but it's been a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. 2010 is when I graduated. I know, like, maybe some light stuff, maybe an alumni game here or there, but dude, I've been all over the place. Like when I finished at Rutgers, I was down in DC for a while. And,
Oh, is that right?
yeah. Like trying to figure out, what I was doing. I ended up bartending for a little while down there, and since then I've kind of moved back into Jersey. I'm working more on I do the comedy thing, but I work in finance. So that's what I've been up to.
Okay.
The past 7 years probably.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
What about you, my friend?
Yeah, I hopped around a little bit myself. Not too much, but I worked in finance a little bit out of college.
Okay.
Then I actually got the opportunity to go play rugby league in Australia.
That's awesome, man. How long were you?
Yeah, so I moved down there in 2013. I lived there.
Okay.
And which was awesome. That was a great experience. It was tough. I never really left Jersey for too long like that. I never lived outside of Jersey, but I went down there and it was a really awesome experience. Made a lot of great lifelong friends down there.
That's awesome.
Came back not really knowing what I wanted to do.
Right.
I was talking to the Army and the Navy and just looking at all different types of stuff. Wound up working for a healthcare agency.
Okay.
And now actually work in pharma. So
nice.
Nice.
And pharma, very important these days.
Yeah.
Very important. I got some stock. I got some Pfizer stock. That's about it.
Okay. I got my second. I helped you out today. I got my second vaccine, my second shot of Pfizer. So yeah, I'm all microchipped and everything else.
Yeah. You got the Bill Gates stuff, man.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I got J&J a few days before they did the pause.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. I was down in Camden. I thought it was going to be Moderna, but they switched it over after a certain time. So when I showed up, they're like, Johnson time. Hey, one and done.
They're like, we got to shut this off starting tomorrow. So let's get rid of these.
Yeah, right. But that's awesome, man. I forgot you were in Australia. Dude. That's cool, man. From everything I've heard from people that have been there, I got a friend named Megan who lived there for a while. She's in veterinary stuff, and she's a farrier, so she was a blacksmith for horses and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, horseshoes and other things. I don't want to minimize what she does, but
yeah.
She lived in Australia for a while and just loved it. Like you said, the culture, the people.
Yeah, the culture is amazing. I mean, I was part of a rugby league club, so that's as playing rugby, that's instant friends.
That's whole brotherhood right there.
Yeah. So I was lucky that way, but yeah, I mean, just laid back people, funny. It's a little bit of a different sense of humor, but very self-deprecating, and just cracking jokes. No one's too sensitive. It's just a little different than here.
Yeah.
So
that word sensitive, that jumps out at me. That's, we're living in more sensitive, empathetic times, we'll say.
Empathetic, yeah. I mean, empathetic is a great thing to a point, but I think we can take ourselves too seriously at times, which is
I think so. Not to jump major into political. Obviously, it's been a kind of crazy week. Politically and everything like that, but I think you're right. Part of that sometimes is just taking yourself too seriously. Just sitting back and be like, am I actually upset, or am I just kind of, am I just making a big thing about something that's not major? Although I gotta be careful saying that, I could get canceled.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? You because you say empathy, right? And I think most people do have empathy for their fellow human beings, but especially when yeah, I think we lose a lot of that in social media, right?
Sure.
Because we're oftentimes interacting with people that we don't see, that we don't know. Not
Right.
me. I don't get involved in all that, but people in general. And man, I don't know where I was going with that.
No. I think you locked in on something with like social media. Like I think that there is an outsized influence on the way we think based on something that's really not rooted in reality, right? Like when you look at social media, you'll see people, it's like the throwback photos, them people that aren't even working and stuff like that. They're like, oh, I'm in Aruba, and I got the kids that like will just have like a wad of hundreds and stuff, and it's like I know that guy. He's not not doing that well.
He's had a job in 5 years.
Yeah, but it's a persona really, and I think what ends up happening is because as interesting of lives I think we've led as like former rugby players, I was a wrestler and stuff, like we've partied hard, we've met a lot of interesting people, and I think it just makes you not like live in the world of bullshit, right? Like when someone can like smack you in the head, makes you it humbles you.
Or what it's like to get smacked in the head by someone bigger than you, But no, I mean, I think, and I guess kind of the point I was trying to make in terms of taking ourselves too seriously and having a sense of humor about ourselves and our shortcomings is, I think, especially when it comes to comedy, and because you see a lot of comedians or a lot of people that make jokes sometimes, catch a lot of heat, get a lot of shit for it, when really it is just a joke, right?
Right.
And I think when you know when you know the person, or the person is it's just a joke, but there's someone behind that cares, that actually does care about you or issues, depending on whether it's a joke personally, or going back to just playing rugby. I mean, that's the you can't think of a much more diverse group than some of the teams we played on, right? Yeah. Different people from all different backgrounds and things like that, and but we all bust balls and bust chops.
I've heard some outlandish jokes. And the funny thing about it is like it just rolls off your back after a while, because we're all like you said, busting chops. But like I'm sure there's some statements that have been said at a rugby party that like if that was on Twitter or something like that, you'd have to like go to HR and try to explain.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I'm really glad. Like we kind of missed the social media thing by like this much.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot of things we said and did back then that between us and our teammates that were literally just jokes, because we genuinely cared about these people, but probably said some pretty terrible things about them, but all in love and good fun.
Yeah.
That if that was recorded, I always said it was like some of the stuff that we did was recorded or made a headline. It'd be really hard to explain how.
Yeah.
But
I recall one kind of event. It's not exactly that vein, but like I remember there was a season when we were like Division I, and like Four Locos was pretty popular at the time, and there may have been a situation where we were drinking some Four Locos, and like it wasn't newspaper, it was more like the internet, but like you open a newspaper, other teams suspended for Four Locos related activity. We're like, oh,
yeah.
Didn't know
Just
that could be a
problem. Yeah. I didn't know I couldn't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Good pick.
But I mean that's part of it. I think that ultimately, we're learning, right? Like we're a constantly growing and evolving group of people. The world's moving very fast because of the internet and social media and stuff like that. And it is easy to get swept up in that, because like you said, we missed that by like this much. Like if I cared about Twitter a little bit more, I don't know what I would have tweeted.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that's that thing, right? Like people now, it's like I have a Twitter, I don't use it.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of browse around. That's kind of my social media in general, other than posting pics of the kids.
Sure.
Right. But yeah, I mean, people seem to get a thought in their head, and the first thing they do is they go and tweet it out. And if I did that with every thought that entered my head, probably get in some trouble too, right? Like, or not that anyone cares what I have to say, but in general, that's what I think you see people get in trouble where, if you just I don't think that's how. Then we get judged on the first thing that pops into our heads,
right?
Which I don't think is,
it's kind of going back to that thing of like social media not being real, right? Like when I see the way people argue, for instance, on Facebook, right? You'll post something and somebody comes in the comments and then it's like that. Then 5 minutes later, now you're posting a paragraph. And it's like, that's not how people interact real time. Like if you said something that upset me, right? Like in a social setting, well, hey, however we have that interaction, like, hey, I appreciate if you wouldn't do that or like cool that down. And you might say, oh, this is what I meant by that. And we can, on a one-to-one basis, sort of work out, what we mean. Because even with the benefit of being able to like see each other and talk, sometimes things are taken the wrong way, right?
Yeah.
Or you may say something, you're like, you're not even thinking about it, but like you just throw it out there and it's like, oh man, sorry, I didn't mean it like that. You don't get that, you don't get them back on social media. You don't get to take things back and apologize in the same way. And as someone that does comedy, like you would think that comics are kind of like a free speech and like protecting sort of class, but honestly, sometimes people are just trying to gun for you. Like you're in a spot they kind of want, and they're like, look what this guy did.
Have you? So I've been. I think I said it when you first put up the something about the podcast that I've actually been following your stuff for a little while now, not in person, but I remember I've always been a huge fan of comedy, and I remember when I first started seeing you like a couple of years back, started like advertising for shows at like Tumulties in New Brunswick and stuff. I'm like, damn, that's pretty cool that Reggie's doing that, giving that a shot. And, so and some of the videos and stuff that you posted and some of the open mic stuff, it's some good stuff, man. So
thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah, but I guess my question: have you ever had anybody come up to you or approach you about something you said at any of these things and said like, that ain't cool, or just get upset about
Yeah, I can say this that like in general, like I think it's important in comedy to kind of know how you're like being perceived, or like at least guess how you're being perceived. So I in general stay away from the third rail. Like there are times where you got to touch it, but I usually don't get a lot of heat. Like I've definitely had someone approach me about a bit before and be like, what's that about? And like work that out. But honestly, the last time I caught heat was I was hosting a mic and some guys said something, right? Like he was a friend of mine, but like he was on stage. It was early in the mic. He said something that someone took offense to. And it wasn't like the guy left the bar. He was still there, right? So I go back up as the host. I'm like, all right, moving on. And this girl's screaming at me. She's like, how could you allow someone to do this or say so? Like, I'm like, hey, look, it's not a show. It's not a paid show. I didn't vet the people that are coming in here. I just put a list down and the guy said something. In fact, he's still right there. If you have something that maybe you guys can work that out. But this person was yelling at me, and at some point she actually rushed the stage. Like, yeah. So, she rushed the stage, and then like, not that I'm gonna fight women or anything like that, but like it got kind of like broken up because people like me, and they're like, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing?
A no-win situation, man. You got a woman run match like that.
Yeah, no, you can't win that exchange.
Yeah, no.
So, and the venue that I was at, like, because, you always play those moments back in your head. You're like, well, could I have brought the temperature down a little bit? Could I have, like, done something? And the answer was probably yes, but at the same time, this person was looking for a fight. And, like, the venue I was at reviewed the footage of everything and came back and like, hey, look, we know it's not you. This is completely out of your control, but, like, we had to kind of take a step back because that business had a reputation to worry about. I got a reputation to worry about, and I purposely try not to get rushed on stage. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I can only it's one thing for a comedian that's very well established, making a full career out of it. I think. Some of those guys and gals at this point are kind of bulletproof, right? They can kind of say things controversial, but some of the funniest stuff goes into those areas that are risky, right?
You got to take a risk,
and they're doing it in a way and kind of threading the needle through an issue to make an actual point be funny, not just to be outright offensive.
Right.
So I can imagine it's pretty tough to try to, play it safe, because you got to, again, worry about your reputation of a venue where you're hosting something. So I give you a lot of credit there, man.
Yeah. So. It's one of those things, like at the level that I'm at, right? Like I'm progressing, getting better and stuff like that. But like when you see people at open mic, a lot of them are unskilled, right? Like they're trying it out. They're trying to figure out how to do it. You hear a lot of just off the wall, in my opinion, unnecessary shit. And it's like, they don't know, like they have this like shock thing that they want to go for, but they don't know how to craft it, right? Like when you look at someone like Anthony Jeselnik's a great example. That guy says some of the most offensive stuff in the world, but like he knows how to like play it, right? Like he's like a good looking guy. He knows that he can flash a smile and like, the crowd will come with him.
Right. Yeah.
I fell in love with his stuff after this might get me canceled. I'm just repeating the joke. But he had this great bit on like I think it's Jim Norton's like had a comedy thing, like a showcase. His first line was, my family's a lot like the Brady Bunch, because my dad died of AIDS too. And I was like, this is your opening bit. This is how you're like this is your best foot forward. And he just went so aggressive. But like that's a style, right? Like if you're gonna be that type of humor, leaning into it is the best case, right? Because like what happens with cancel culture, I think the most, is when you put on this persona of like, I'm a clean cut guy, or I would never do this, and then you get caught doing something. Now it's like, now it's a controversy. Versus someone like that. Jim Norton's a good example. Attell's a good example of like guys. Honestly, the best example is Louis C.K., who has been kind of canceled.
They almost got him. I think Bill Burr too.
Burr, yeah, but I think Burr just navigates that so well, and I think Burr is a great example, right? He has constantly said off the wall things, but like it's how he really feels, right? And there's no malice in it, and I think people can see that.
That's the important part, right? The not having bad intentions behind it. Like he did that bit in his Saturday Night Live monologue. We were talking about Gay Pride Month and Black History Month, and because the thing forever has always been like, oh, Black History Month's the shortest month of the year, but but he took that and it was, I could see how people found it offensive. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like, he's got a point, and it's funny, and he did it well.
The other side of it, like, not to use like I have a black friend defense, but like Bill Burr's married to a black woman. He's got a mixed race child. He's like been friends with some, like he did the Patrice O'Neal documentary. I think
Patrice is one of his best friends.
Yeah, Patrice is one of the greatest to ever do it, and one of those guys that was one of those like push the envelope type characters. And people often say like, I wonder what it would be like if Patrice was in this era, and I think he would be doing similar stuff to Bill. He would still be pushing it, trying to cancel him. But when you have a certain platform, some people are uncancelable, right? Like like a recent example is Shane Gillis. Like he was going to be on SNL, and they went back on a podcast where he said something offensive about Asians, and he got canceled from SNL. And everyone was like, "Oh my God, this the cancel culture." And I'm like, well, to be honest, you can't be on NBC and have that. Like, you can do comedy, you can sell tickets to a show, but like, you can't sell Tide Pods, right? Like, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think if you go that route of comedy, you have to understand that you're probably not going to get corporate gigs, right? And for some people, that's part of their artistry. They're like not going to compromise to, make a little bit more money in this sector. So like, sometimes the cancel isn't like this terrible thing that happens to you. Sometimes it's kind of a badge of honor. Like, some people really don't care about that big, like I mentioned, kind of corporate side of it.
Yeah, well, I think for the longest time, you needed that. That was the only way to make a living in that industry was to get on a sitcom or to have a network pick up your show or something like that, right? But now with the internet, you can, or Netflix doesn't seem to care because they buy they buy on all these guys' specials, regardless.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's so many different ways for these guys to make a living that the ideas can have other ways to get out there. I mean, Mark, I don't know if you follow Mark Norman at all.
Oh yeah, I love Mark.
Yeah, not that he's gotten any trouble or anything like that, but he couldn't get a Netflix or anyone to buy a special, so he just put it on YouTube.
Yeah,
and people are doing that now too. So
and guys like that are smart. Like Mark Norman's a good example. Andrew Schultz is a good example of someone that leverage YouTube like in a way that next level.
Speaking of. Did you see I think his latest tweet or it was on Instagram? So when the Derek Chauvin verdict came down,
right,
he put up a meme with Derek Chauvin's face that "White Boy Summer's been canceled."
Yeah, that's so funny.
He's like, for anyone that's going to get mad about this, so and so, to his friends, he's like, I checked with them, they said it was all right.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah.
I'm actually working on a White Boy Summer joke right now. I like where it's going. Yeah.
All right.
So I don't want to go too much into it. I'll tell you off mic, but
it's because another thing too. Those things got to be worked out. You know what I mean? Like you gotta, because you think you got your point down and made, and you gotta get on stage and work it out. See, craft your words
real time. Like going back to someone like Louis, who obviously had his troubles during the Me Too era, but like. I look at him as like a gold standard for someone that can take a very uncomfortable topic and like work it out to be something palatable. And going back to what I was saying about the open mic scene, sometimes people are just offensive and they don't know how to bring the funny in, right?
Right.
Which is part of the learning process, really. But while learning, you may stumble. But basically what I mean though is that like if you know how to frame things, if you have like a larger point, you can take things that like are big no-nos and then make them work, because people can see that you're not disparaging this group, you're not trying to punch down, as they say. You're really just like, you found something that you think is interesting, you have a thought about it, and you're trying to get people to understand how you think about it. But but at the end of the day, I think when it comes to all this stuff, ultimately it's not me as an artist or the person that says it that gets to determine whether or not it was offensive. Unfortunately, it does end up being the world, and it's in some ways it's democratic, and enough people say it doesn't work. I guess it doesn't work.
Well, there's a difference between it not working and it being offensive, because being offensive is so subjective.
Yeah,
and this is what I've even I've gotten into it with my mom sometimes when I make off color comments.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't say that. That's not right. That's offensive. But it's offensive to you. If I decide that something you say is you can go around and do that all day long.
Oh, yeah, we can do that all day.
There's no, and like you said, it's a bit of a democratic process. Enough people make us think about it. Mm-hmm. But even with that, is it really that democratic, or is it just the loudest voice, people that complain the most?
It's often just a loud minority.
Right.
I think it breaks down like this, right? Like 10%, and again, this is unscientific, but like 10% on either side of the equation, whether you're conservative, liberal, something like that, are going to be loud as shit. You're going to hear everything they have to say, and the rest of us are going to kind of slide in somewhere in the middle, and just like sometimes you'll push back, and sometimes you'll be like, hey, this is not worth fighting with this person.
Nope. Yeah.
I'm not passionate enough about this subject matter to engage with you for multiple days on like a social media post. Like it's just sometimes you just have to concede the ground because it's not worth it. But
I mean, if I jumped in every time I had something to say about something I disagreed with that someone else posted on social media, that would be my life. I wouldn't have time for anything else.
But I think what's important though too, kind of going back, is like I do have different theories about like cancel culture to how effective it is. I think like the overall idea of it is probably overstated, but it certainly exists, right? But I think that it's important to have things in your life that keep you away from like the social media screen, so that you don't waste a lot of time or go crazy with these internet flame wars. Like I've been following some of your stuff, and I noticed you got into running, and I've I got into it last year because like the pandemic, I was like, what am I going to do with some of this free time? And I did like a 5K challenge, and I was like, all right. I thought I hated running, and I was like,
I still
like
do, but yeah,
no,
I do.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I don't think anyone actually ever ends up like. It's like you love it when it's over, and you're like, damn, that feels good.
Yeah.
But you hate it otherwise. But yeah, I did something. You're familiar with David Goggins?
Yeah.
So he's got this thing called the 4x4x48, where you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours.
That's some Goggins shit right there.
That's something that's just got him written all over it.
Yeah.
Right? So before this year, I had never run more than like I used to run those 5Ks at Rutgers.
Sure.
And then whatever, we ran a rugby game, but like to get out and just run to run, I never did more than a 5K. I started running with one of my buddies at the beginning of the year, just something to do, get out, hang out, whatever. And he's like, hey, you want to do this? So we started doing that. And then back in March, we did it. You start on like a Friday night at 8 o'clock, I think we started.
Okay.
So then you run 4 miles, 8 o'clock, midnight, another 4 miles, 4 a.m., another 4 miles, 8 a.m., all the way through till Sunday at 4 p.m.
Yeah, how'd the wife like that?
Yeah, we had, at the time, we got a 2-year-old, and at the time, my daughter was only 2 or 3 months old.
Okay.
So, yeah, she didn't like it too much. I left her home with that. Now, she was great. I mean, I could have done without her. She supported me, and did it.
That's awesome. Yeah. But I think that stuff's important, right? I think that no matter where you are in your life, that it's important to be able to still kind of like set goals and challenge yourself, right? Because you can't sit back and get stagnant in life. It's too short. You got too much to live for,
It's so cliche. I hate even saying it, but it is so true. I feel it's so true that if you're not growing, you're dying, right?
Yeah.
If you're not challenging yourself with something, right? Like I hate to read. I really do. I got like ADD. I can't get through a page without thinking about something else. But like that's one of my goals I'd set for myself now is to start trying to sit down and read. I've just started with like articles, like long articles. Get through that. I'd like to start reading books again. I haven't done that in years. But
I was in the same boat where like I found myself very busy and it was like I don't have time to read. And during the pandemic, some old college buddies hit me up and they are in a book club, but it's also like a scotch tasting, right? So they every time we get a couple bottles of scotch and we have a tasting, we kind of talk about the books. So like I said, I haven't read a full book before that, maybe like 7 years, right? And now I'm like every month I'm reading, and I joined another book club, and I'm like running through a book right now to try to get it done before Friday so I can talk about it.
Yeah. That's accountability. You got some accountability, right?
Yeah,
you're accountable to these people. So
I think though it may depend on the medium, right? Like if you gave me just like a regular paperback book right now, I'm probably not gonna finish it. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm probably not gonna finish it. But like I started reading like a Kindle, and there's something about just being able to swipe, seeing how far into the book I am, seeing that like 3%, 7% at the bottom, like it just makes me want to finish.
Yeah.
And I also will supplement that with like audio sometimes, but like I know it's controversial, but like I don't think you're really reading it. It's just
I tried the audio thing because I'm like maybe since I don't like to read or can't get through reading, I'll just do it in the car. Drive, it's easy. The same thing. I'd start, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Then I should start thinking about something else. And then 15 minutes goes by in the audiobook and I have no idea what anyone said. So
that's why like podcasts to me are a little bit better because like I often find like when I was, earlier we were talking about kind of hopping around trying to figure out what we wanted to do career wise. I would listen to like Rogan's podcast. I listen to different podcasts and I'd also find myself just almost like meditating and thinking about like different things. So like I had it on, but I was, reflecting on other things. And like, with audiobook, you're right. Like 15 minutes, you have no idea what's even happening anymore.
Yeah. What other podcasts do you follow?
So it's been some time. Like I basically, like many men in our country, I studied at the School of Rogan. So like
I'm the same, man. I hardly miss one.
Yeah. I started there, got into Burr's podcast. when Tom Segura and his wife started doing the Your Mom's House podcast, I got into that. But outside of just the comedy stuff, I actually last guest I had on, I started listening to this one called The Blacklist Table Reads, which is about basically scripts that were in Hollywood that never got made. So they would get actors to come and read them, kind of similar to like audiobooks. And I found it very interesting because it spurred my imagination, right? Like I could kind of envision what that would look like on the big screen, and I find that interesting. And from the Rogan camp, like Hardcore History with I'm drawing a blank. I think the guy's name is Dan Harmon, but they're like 4 or 5 hour long podcasts about like some historical event. They're great.
Yeah, that's the hard thing about them. There's so many out there. So many.
You're on one right now.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, it's just like you can't get to them all. Like there's, and it's there's so many out there that are interesting and funny. And there's, I mean, even if you just wanted to watch Rogan's or listen to Rogan's, he makes how many a day or a week that you.
Yeah, no. He's usually good for about every other day. He's probably good for about 2 podcasts. That's pretty. It's a crazy clip. But look, I mean, he changed the way that media works, right? Like legitimately, because there were others that were before him. I know he brings up like Adam Carolla and stuff like that, but no one else just had whoever they wanted on with that large of an audience for that long.
Yeah. And you know what he does even better? I like Adam Carolla. I think he's hilarious. I've gone back and listened to when he was on Rogan's podcast, like the 200s, episodes. Sure. And he's funny, but I don't think anybody has, and the reason he's been so successful is his ability to be an unbiased, just kind of listen and try to understand someone's point of view. Like he's taught me even how to be a better listener of points of view that I might not necessarily agree with, but trying to be, he's a very I think he's a very like empathetic or compassionate person. Sure. Which has not always been my strong suit, but I've come around a lot more that way because I'm like, because even having different politicians or people on there that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, right? But letting them explain themselves out in a 2 to 3 hour, we want the same thing, right? But I could just tell you think about this a little differently, and you're trying to get to that same goal that I do. You just got a different idea how to get there.
I think you nailed it, man. Like I've definitely learned that from that podcast. Even my wife, she's brought it up in the past. Like you'll have like someone like Milo Yiannopoulos, whatever that guy's name was. It was like my politics couldn't be any further from his, but like I listen to what the guy had to say, and there are things I disagree with. There are things where I'm like, okay, I see how you got here, right? And I think that it's important because I feel in our current political discourse, we just dismiss people, right? Like if someone differs this much, like they're irredeemable. I can't listen to anything they say, and it's kind of I don't think it's the right way to approach it because I think we start to split ourselves in a way that's unnatural, and you do have to work with people that you're not going to agree with.
Well, yeah, I think what you said is like that person deviates a little bit, you automatically put them in the other camp. Yeah. Because there's only 2 camps, right? Like there's no room for nuance or in a lot of people's minds. And once you start doing that, you alienate a ton of people, and it goes back to you're not growing, you're dying. You're not learning anything new because you're only prescribing to this belief system that like, the issue comes up. What is my party or my religion or whatever? Tell me to think about this. That's how I think. Right.
I really hate being boxing. I mean, you've known me a long time. I don't know if I fit into a neat little box. But like, with some of the stuff that we're seeing now, like you mentioned the Chauvin thing earlier, like my grandfathers were in the military. My brother's a cop. He's actually a Capitol Police officer. So that was a whole experience for me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's like, I look at stuff on the left, which I think, on the spectrum, I'm probably leaning towards that direction, right? But like I'll see a post that's like all cops are bastards. I'm like, well, I can't subscribe to that. It's like, and look, I appreciate that's how you feel.
yeah. No.
But yeah.
There's this like movement or this effort to just take people and group them into cops or black people or white people or teachers, even, like whatever. It's just like, and to say that it's like people are complicated.
Yeah.
People have different ideas, and like I don't want to say no two people are the same. I'm sure there's people that are real similar, but like I'm sure your opinions about a lot of police brutality issues are complicated, right?
I mean, very much so,
because it's a complicated issue. It's not as simple as any one of these situations that goes down is never as simple as one side. Sometimes, listen, I mean, there's sometimes where there's blatant things that are blatant one way or the other, but a lot of times, like,
it's squishy middle, man.
Yeah,
and I think when it comes to a lot of it, like going back to like just not being boxed in, I've met too many people, right? Like you've traveled, you've met people all over the world and stuff like that. I don't know, like I don't like the way that I think social media and like the internet, TV and stuff like that try to kind of play on our emotions, right? Like part of the reason I did this podcast was mostly because when you see people have conversations now, like on platforms, it's like, we're yelling, we're going, like, I'd like to see people just kind of chilling out, talking, seeing, like, everything doesn't have to be on like 100, right? Like, I would like to see more just like dialogue. And because I wasn't seeing it, I was like, well, I'm gonna make it. I'm just gonna make some of that.
I give you a lot of credit, man. It's something that I had the same exact thoughts you do. You see all this stuff, and I'm looking at people saying some stuff that is out there, and these are people I liked,
right?
Or like, or when I was.
It could be both, man. It could be both. Yeah.
But it's like you see that going on. You're like, man, I just want to talk to them, and like, I just want to kind of talk this out, like kind of see where they're coming from a little bit more, and you see people saying things that are acting a different way on social media than that they act in person.
Right. Yeah.
This is members of my family as well, not just people from my past or friends, and you're like, and you start to look at that person a little differently, just not because of what they're saying, but because of how they're choosing to put that out there, as opposed to talking issues through with people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I mean, like I working in the finance game, and I know you've been there before. Like you meet like a pretty, contrary to popular belief, you meet a pretty diverse group of people while doing so. And like I've heard a lot of like different opinions or like politics or like not that I'm not necessarily aligned with, but like I find it interesting. I like to, like you mentioned before, seeing how someone got there. So like you take like a hot button issue like the immigration, like the border surge or something like that, and like hearing other people talk about it, I'm like, oh wow, I didn't consider that, right? Like I don't pretend to know the answer to life's hardest questions.
Yeah.
So like I just sit back, I kind of see how one side's approaching it, how the other side's approaching it, and like I have, like I said, my opinions about things, but like I see how complex things are. So it's very difficult for me to just get outright upset at someone's take on it.
Well, I think one thing you said there, that if more people had that, we'd be a lot better off, is just knowing that you don't have the answer to all life's complicated issues, where some people think they do.
Very much so.
So, and having that level of humility to understand, like, hey, I don't know it all, and here's what I know. And then just realizing that your experience is not everyone's experience too,
not at all.
Which is something that I've kind of started to come around to a little bit more, is like through a conversation with different types of people, like you said, is like where there's issues where that come up and you're just like, oh, or someone gives you their point of view on an issue and you're like, oh, me being who I am would have never even thought about that.
Sure.
I've gone through it. You know what I mean? And it's even like, okay, there's an opportunity to be like, okay, wow, I had never thought about that. But then to respond to that person, well, hey, guess what? That's your experience, and this is mine.
Right.
Or someone else I know went through this, and but that's just how we get better and understand everyone more. And listen, and Facebook statuses and comments are not the way to do it, because it just doesn't work, man. Then you get someone's crazy aunt and uncle jumping in and saying, it's just like, it's chaos.
Especially considering, like, for the most part, you're talking to another human being, but like, there are times where, like, hey, you're talking to like an algorithm right now. Like, are you really like letting some ones and zeros take you out of your element? And I think, again, as someone that, like, you got a family, you got kids and stuff like that, like, the way you're thinking about the world is different than the way I am right now. Like, I'm married, but like, I'm not at the point where I have kids, right? So like, I might look at some schoolish and be like, well, it's not that bad. It's like, well, I don't got to send my kid there. I don't have to.
The way I look at the world,
the
way I look at the world now is different than I did 2 years ago. I mean, you wouldn't believe how that changes your perspective on things.
I can't even imagine.
Just being a father makes you, I think, naturally just makes you more compassionate and caring without even thinking about it. Because now you're like, oh, well, what would I do if that was my son? Or you just start having to think of needing to explain the world to a child at some point. And you're like, well, how am I going to explain this to them in a way that they understand? Or what am I going to teach them about how to think and how to act and behave and all these different things? You know what I mean? And it's, it's different. It's different for sure.
I think so. And I think that kind of going back in like the entertainment, like comedic field, I think where a lot of the frustration comes from these days is that there's not really a place to, in the media sense, kind of escape from these issues, right? Like, I think a lot of people, when there's always like the back and forth about like sports, for instance, a lot of people are just looking to just like, oh, I just want to see someone hit a baseball, right? Like, I don't want to think about my local police union, But I unfortunately, again, going back to that kind of corporate thing, like, our whole world is connected in this way now, where I think if you're going to look for escapism in that way, you almost have to kind of purposely do it yourself, right? And I know that that's a big point of frustration for a lot of people, because sometimes you just want to watch you guys shoot a basketball.
No, but I think, and it's probably not the point you were making, but it's something that I learned through this pandemic is, and I think a lot of people start to realize this, is that when we were shut up, a lot of the things that we used to be able to do, we were told we can't do. Kind of made me realize, like, we were all probably relying on other ththen for our security, for our food, for our entertainment. And then all of a sudden you're stuck at home, and it's like, well, hell, now I'm responsible for all that. If I want to be entertained, I got to entertain myself, right? Or there's still Netflix and all that, right? But like, like you were saying, we relied on sports for our escape. A lot of people did. And now that's not really an escape anymore, because it's gotten very, very political. ESPN is another Fox News or CNN anymore, right? So it's like, one of the things that this whole thing has kind of made me realize is, if you want an escape, you got to create it, right? If you want security, you need to be responsible for that, for whatever that means to you, So
I think that because of like the nature of whatever you want to call it, capitalist system or something like that, right? Like, we're consumers for the most part, right? Like, most of the time you engage with something, it's like there's a price point on it, and you're like, all right, here's a cup of coffee, here's $5 for me to experience that. The baseball game, here's StubHub, probably like here's $150 so I can go sit and
plus the convenience fee.
So like, when you're in a sort of consumer set, and this is why I like comedy and different arts, you don't really have a huge choice of like what you're gonna get, right? Versus like, I've really gotten into making stuff, because like, I don't know, like I'm kind of bored just like consuming it, right? So like, that's one of my motivations. And I think, going back to like the 4-4-4 challenge that you were talking about, like, that's you stepping out. Like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to wake up at 12 in the midnight and go run, but like, you did that for you. That wasn't for anybody other than yourself. And I think people need to find more things to do for themselves. And for me, it's really helped me kind of mellow out and like not be so tuned into this crazy media landscape that we have right now.
Yeah. What kind of stuff are you making?
So I mean, like I've got like this podcast. Over the pandemic, I got into yoga for a little bit. Like I literally got a certification so I can teach yoga now.
Okay.
My wife's into painting, so like I'm not good at it, but like I just started painting, so I'll throw a record on and I'll paint from time to time, and it's just like trying different stuff out to pass the time and try to develop as a human being.
Yeah. Now I did two things. One actually right before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I'm working on now, Doran, I'll get to that. But before the pandemic hit, it was actually after I got married.
Okay.
We had the house out in the country, and we were living out there, and I'm working, and you're married now. You're not doing the things you were doing before you were married. You're a little more tied down.
Yeah.
So I wanted to try to start doing something a little bit more locally to me. Mm-hmm. And so I became a firefighter.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. That's awesome. I went through the fire academy and started volunteering in my town.
That's awesome.
And you just talk about something that was pretty difficult. It's a whole lot more to learn. Mm-hmm. A whole skill set, a whole different culture and community, but it's been phenomenal, right? To be able to, and you're also doing a good thing, right? You're helping your local community. So that's been, but it was something to do, right? I felt like I was kind of stuck at home a lot more and without any of the old fun that I used to have, to create something new. But during the pandemic, after that hit, we actually wound up selling our house.
Okay.
And we're building a new one. That's what my father does. He's a builder.
Nice.
So we're building a new one, but it's on about 9 acres. So the plan is to have like a little farm.
Yeah. That's awesome.
One of the things that kind of freaked me out, and it's like I've always had different animals. We have a dog. I kept chickens at the old place. Mm-hmm. So I've always kind of enjoyed that. I've always been an outdoorsman, hunting and fishing. But one of the things at the beginning of the pandemic, it kind of freaked me out a little bit, was going to the grocery store and, the lines and they're not being not being able to get meat and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I took it as like, this is as bad as this was for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. This pandemic could have been a lot worse.
I say it all the time, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we showed how this tiny little, in the grand scheme of things, a tiny blip in our system, disrupted the whole supply chain of things. So I took it at the opportunity to take that upon myself to say, hey, listen, I'd like to create, a world where if shit goes bad again, I'm a little bit more self-reliant.
You got some wiggle room,
Yeah.
No, I think that's important, and I think that another side of it is like, especially with kids and stuff like that, like you're gonna be able to give your kids a lot of lessons that most people are not gonna be able to provide their children anymore, right? Like there's something about sort of like that sustainable kind of lifestyle. There's something about like that call to nature. Like we have gotten a little bit away from nature. I mean, a little bit, like a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I'm not necessarily an outdoorsman, but I have a profound appreciation for it. I respect people that are into it, like the conservation side of it, everything like that. But yeah, I think I think it's important to, like, going back to what you're saying there, like that self-reliance, that like, look, all right, so maybe I can't go to the grocery store this week, but I planted something over here. I got, water supply. I can kind of make this work for a little bit.
Yeah. There's actually one of the things that really got me thinking about it, or realizing that I could do it. There's a guy named Joel Salatin.
Okay.
He's been actually on Rogan's podcast twice. Mm-hmm. But he's just a huge promoter of. He's got his own huge farm operation down in Virginia. Right. But he's just huge into encouraging people to become more self-reliant for at least part of their food. And he said it's not all owning acres and acres of land. He knows plenty of people, or he's talked to plenty of people that have done this in urban settings. Mm-hmm. In a vacant lot. Have started a community garden for their local community and sell fresh produce to communities that didn't have access to it before. So it's a lot. I mean, we think of farms and we think of always being out in the country and having all this land and huge capital investment.
Yeah.
His biggest thing is teaching people how to start small in a way that's manageable, and then maybe be able to scale it at some point later. So
that's really cool. Yeah. I went to something, I think it was in Newark. There's this group, they're called like Johanna on Grafton, like Grafton Avenue or something like that. And it's a community garden, right? Like I went out there, actually the first time I ever taught yoga, which was an interesting experience. First and last so far. It won't be the last, but so far. They had a whole little community thing, went out there, and there's just something about that. Like, everyone always talks about like kind of like the good old days, but like they don't have to be the old days. Like, it was interesting seeing people in their community interacting. Like, I don't see that very often anymore, and it was cool to see. Definitely cool to see.
Yeah, so. And yeah, there's just something about getting outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interacting with people, doing something together, working towards a common goal. Like with the, I sound like an old man now, but video games and social media and the internet, it's like our entire lives are inside in front of our screens. It seems like, where you lose a lot of that. And with that, you lose knowing your neighbors, knowing the people in your community.
Sure.
That's where you start to look at other people. It's not people, but others, or
right.
Ones and zeros, like you were saying.
Yep.
Whereas if you're out and you're doing things with people and you're interacting, and it just, to me, it sounds very utopian, but it's, and like, oh, those days are gone, but I don't see why they have to be.
No, they don't have to be. And I think going back to something you said earlier, like this pandemic is an opportunity. Like for me, like you mentioned, same thing. Like it showed me a few things about myself, like some places where I could make improvements. Something as simple as losing my commute. Like I've been working remotely. That extra like 2 hours a day, I've been able to find some use for it, right? And
yeah,
I think based off of kind of like what I'm seeing, actually later on tonight, I'm going out to an open mic that I'm running. I see people that are ready to get back out, ready to interact, ready to like, be part of the world again. And maybe if we're lucky, we have an opportunity where people are going to start kind of engaging with each other more. And, maybe that can kind of, like you mentioned, kind of bring back some of this tension that's clearly out there right now. It's a very tense time in a way that I think is an unnatural tension. Like this is not, it's not like it's not normal for people to see issues in places that aren't like in their immediate vicinity, right? Like, if you're like, oh, look what happened in London, look what happened in India, look what happened in South Dakota. Like we're doing that. Like we're taking a camera and we're just like, a great example, right? Like my in-laws live in Oregon, right? So when all those protests and things are happening in Portland, for a whole month, we're just kind of looking at it. It's crazy. It's bedlam out there. And I was like, we're fine, right? It's a problem for sure, but it's like 2 or 3 blocks in this big ass state.
Yeah.
And we're all like, the world's burning. And it's like,
it feels that way.
It does.
That's all you see. Yeah.
It does, because we're magnifying. And like I said, I'm not trying to minimize it. There are problems with people just out in the streets doing whatever the hell they think they're doing. But at the same time, like, it's not this like rampaging, like it's not a wildfire spreading across the country. At least I hope not.
Well, no, I'm glad you said that, because I look at stuff like that and I feel the same way. I look out my window and I mean, I'm not in Oregon, but like, because I know people that get worked up about this stuff. And I'm like, listen, like, are you okay? Like, you're not saying this isn't on your block, is it? Not to say that we shouldn't care about things, but it's like, let's context. There is something to be said about, worrying about yourself sometimes, and letting people having problems work out their problems in the places that they have those problems. And if you feel like you really need to get involved, but the likelihood is you're not going to do anything to help them. Not from here,
Yeah.
So don't worry about it. And
it's gonna be. I'm sure people are gonna be scratching their heads when I say it. It's like when you look at like the Trump era, right? Like I think that he took on this like America first stance, right? And for some people, that's like, oh, xenophobia or something like that. But I do think that there was something to that idea of like, let's bring down the scale, right? Let's kind of look at what's happening here, what's happening in our community. And like, I know he's a polarizing figure, but not everything the man did was was worth the controversy that came with it.
I'm glad you said that too, because there's a reason he was for a time very popular, very successful.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think to say that the reason was that, and there's people that believe that it's just that he's a racist and half the country's racist. So that's why he was so, I don't buy into that. And I think, for a long time, in this country, we've looked at all the money the money we send overseas and all the corruption in politics and all the waste in government. And the promise, at least from him, was that, he started saying these things that were on people's minds for so long.
Yeah.
So the promise there was like, people started going, because there's a lot of people in this country that feel left behind, right?
Sure.
And feel like they've been forgotten about. And they're like, well, hey, I'm an American. You're taking our tax dollars, sending them there. So I and that's not me, but I get how people could hear that message and go, that's my guy, or that sounds like something I'd get on board with. Now, whether that actually happened or there was a whole lot of other
exactly
inflammatory things that went on there, but I think
like anyone with a political movement, there's always going to be a difference between the promise and the outcome, right?
Right.
And
he sold the shit out of it, though.
He's out there
he's got a cult following, man.
And to be honest, like a lot of that mindset is actually still permeating in our politics, because there were very popular aspects of his message, right? Like I said, I always try to call balls and strikes, right? Like for instance, like when you look at like the tariff idea, like with China, I was like, I see what you're trying to do there. I don't know if that's the solution, but I see what you're trying to do. So like I always looked at it as like, okay, that this is an attempt to solve a certain problem. And I think that ultimately, like you were saying about like the forgotten people, I had to check myself, because there were times where I was like, hey, it doesn't affect me. And like, as like a Black person in this country, right? It's like there were plenty of times where something didn't affect other people.
Yeah.
That
I kind of wish someone spoke up.
And like talking about reading, I read like Hillbilly Elegy, and I talked to different people with different opinions. And I started saying, okay, I do see how like your group has become easily dismissed, right? A lot of like the complaints about cancel culture do come from that experience of like, I can't operate, again, there's not to touch the third rail, but like there's people felt like their voice was being diminished. And that when people feel like that, they push back. So like I think it is important to listen to the other side, whatever that means for you. And I agree with you on the other side too, which is if we live in a world where 40% of this country is racist, then we failed. Like
we would know it.
Yeah,
you'd really know it. You know what I mean? And you see these instances of it online, or a story that you hear, and it's like, I'm not. You know what I mean? Like it exists, right? I mean, it's just a not human nature to say that to excuse it, but it's like I know it's out there, but is it 40%? Is it 50%?
Right. It's quantifiable, and I don't know if we're going to be able to quantify it. But like, I look at an example like this. Like today, I was on Facebook, and I saw somebody post something, and it was like an interaction where someone called the authorities on like a Black person who like was around a building, and part of the narrative, right? And I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. And I looked into it. I'm like, this was 2 years ago. Like, why are you like? Not to say it's not a problem, right? But like, why are you posting in this environment, right?
Right.
Something from 2 years ago today, without the context of being like, can you imagine this happened 2 years ago? Like you're treating it like it was something that happened yesterday. And if I didn't take the time myself to look into it, I was like, it's more of the same, right? And it's like there are real problems. We are still, it appears, some time away from like you mentioned, that kind of utopia moment. But I don't think we need to feed our worst instincts, right? Like if you're going to address real social issues, I don't think that, again, this is one man's opinion, I don't think that it helps to highlight an event from several years ago that in presented as something that's happening right now.
Well, but I think that's it. I think it's any injustice that's done should be called out, right? And noted, and something done about, if by the appropriate people. But I think what I see a lot of, because you see a lot of these corporate trainings on microaggressions and things of that nature now, that some of these things that, and the one I heard more recently was more to do with gender.
Okay.
Where, oh God, I got to try to remember this to make sure I'm putting this out there right. But it was something to the effect of, such and such felt like they were interrupted in a meeting more than their male counterpart was.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, you look at that and you go, okay, like, if there's somebody that is talking over a woman more in a meeting because she's a woman, then, that's an issue, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But, is this particular woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was the person that was talking over her more, was that person just kind of doing it to everybody, but
right.
She felt like it was zeroed in on her? I feel like when you try to make every bad thing that happens and link it to it happening to you because of who you are as a person, that you might not be looking at the real issue. Like maybe she could have been more assertive,
sure.
Right?
Sure.
And maybe she's just not a very assertive person, not because she's a woman, just because that's who she is. Because that happens to men that are not assertive too.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And again, I don't know if I'm making that point very well or getting it across.
I think honestly, the funny thing is, like, at the end of the day, neither of us are like going to be experts in this field. Like I said, it's definitely like we said before, it's one of those hot button things that like there are people that think more deeply about this who are probably able to speak better on it. But ultimately, I think what we're really getting at though is that like that there are always going to be different schools of thought. There's always going to be different opinions about how things are going down, and it's an incremental kind of fight, as it were. Fight's even the right word. Like, change is difficult. It takes time. I think that we are, as a society, we're more locked into this than we ever have been, and I know that creates tension in our world. And that's really all I can say about it, right? That like, that's the reality of it. And there are certainly things, like we were saying at the beginning of the podcast, that I've done or said that, like, going back, is like, not great. Right? And you always got to reflect on where you stand in the world and how you interact with people, and how you're perceived.
Yeah, but the other thing, just like you said, we've all made comments or done things or treated people a certain way, probably in our past, that we even regret now. Mm-hmm. But I think the ability, there needs to be room for forgiveness, right? Too, right? To realize that maybe that person said or did something on a bad day. Not that that's an excuse for it, sure. But if that person does truly, I don't think any of us should be held to what we might have said or did 10 or 15 years ago, or on a bad day, or there's got to be room for. I mean, listen, sometimes the nature of what you do is of doing a bad thing is there's consequences, and you got to suffer those consequences. But this perception that we're trying to push people out of society or out of culture entirely because of something bad or something regretful they said a long time ago is, I just don't think it's fair, because it'll come back around to you at some point.
I think that's ultimately it, because like I've seen I've seen that kind of play itself out. Like, again, more in like an entertainment space where, going back to like that Shane Gillis character I was talking about. There was a comedian that was like really going in on him, like talking about all the stuff that he did, and then they pulled receipts on him, and like he was like, well, damn, right?
Yeah.
You know,
you know,
you know, and that's it, right? Like, I think that when trying to address these issues, there's a way to go about it, because like you mentioned, it's very much you can be in the crosshairs, and that's fine. Like you said, every action has a consequence, right? But trying to give people the grace in general, like, again, we have very egregious examples where like you've passed the line, right? But you know, there's space to try to, like, I guess almost like rehabilitate, you know what I mean? Kind of like the idea of like giving someone the ability in space to evolve and grow rather than like shutter themselves off from the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, evolve and grow, right? Like, I mean, I don't know about you. I've had ideas about different things or positions in the past that I've changed my mind about.
Yeah.
You know, I've been given the time to you know, talk to different people or you know, just understand a topic better, or have my own life experiences come around. And you know, everyone should have that same ability. So now if I put those initial thoughts out on Twitter,
yeah,
you know, I might not get that chance. So maybe that's a lesson both ways, right?
Yeah.
You know, keep some ideas to yourself until you have time to really think them out, you know?
Yeah. I think that's part of it, though. Like, the other side of it is like, as much as collectively we kind of harken back on a time where you could, people were less sensitive. Like, well, honestly, everyone has always filtered themselves. You can't just do whatever.
Right.
You can't do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't know. It's a difficult conversation. It's a difficult space to navigate. And I don't pretend to have the answers. I don't, I don't have the answers. I'm glad they were able to kind of just sit here and kind of like work this out. I'm sure it's going to be kind of an awkward, like, because it's an awkward conversation, but like, I think it's important that we, try to express ourselves and work through like our feelings about like our current, state as a country, as just people living in the world. I think it's important to kind of think about where we are as a society.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I'd call it an awkward conversation. It's awkward. You mentioned like some of these things are difficult for me to talk about,
sure.
Just because, sure. I, as somebody that is empathetic and cares about just people in general and doesn't want anyone to have a bad plot. It's like, there's that, but then, you want to talk about these issues in a way that, while I'm also aware of how I might be perceived if I say things a certain way, as in, and I don't want to come across as not understanding of someone else's position, because truthfully, until someone sits down and explains that, they say walk a mile in someone's shoes. You can't really ever do that. The way that you do that is to have them explain it to you, and, but yeah, I mean, I hope one thing that comes across anyone that watches this is two guys that are generally good dudes that just are just, I don't want to say upset with the way that the world is, but there's some crazy stuff going on, and kind of hoping things work themselves out to a point where we could all, kind of, not to be too kumbaya about it, but
sure.
kind of chill out a little bit more than we've been able to.
Yeah. I think for me, ultimately, is it's the discourse and, hitting a balance where we're not constantly kind of hitting a nerve on each other, right? Because I don't think that we, again, one man's opinion, I don't think that we get further by just outright splitting, like I said, this, if you look at like the media, for instance, like there's left and there's right, like it's just split, right? I think that it doesn't, that box doesn't quite work like that. And I'm interested in dialogue. I'm interested in, hearing people out, seeing what makes them tick, because I think you have to understand where people are coming from to try to understand them, you know. And if you have like good ideas that need to be like put out there, you got to find out how to like speak to someone that may not immediately want to hear your take on it. You know?
Right. Yeah, dialogue is so important, and just hearing people out, because I think the more you do that, and the more, again, I go back to some of the people I've seen on Rogan that I thought were Miley Cyrus. I thought she was. I watched that one. I watched that interview, and I thought she was out of her mind. And then you sit there and you listen, and you're like, oh, she went through that. Oh, that must have been crazy growing up this way or with this. And you're like, and you share talk about things. And I'm not saying I'm a big Miley Cyrus fan or anything, but I'm like, I kind of understand some of the stuff she's been through, and that should just be how we interact with people, is hearing them out, not just assuming because they have a certain thought or position that person's crazy, and write them off and dismiss them.
When you look at someone like Miley, who growing up, child actor, famous father, Hollywood, all this stuff, like there's just so much going on in her life, and like hearing her tell stories about like growing up with dad, how close she is with her family and stuff like that. You see that other side of her that you're not going to see when she's on stage and like the outfits and everything like that. When she's putting out, different music, and like she is a complex and interesting person, right? Like I say, you may not gravitate towards her whole vibe, but it's like, all right, like didn't know that about you. It's kind of cool to know.
Yeah. No, but that's just people, right? That's everybody. So like, you see someone with a bumper sticker or a flag outside their house for a politician, or a Facebook status, or you're like, you kind of get an idea of where they're coming from, and you're like, you kind of get turned off by them. But then you sit down, and if you talk with that person, you just like with you were saying about hers, everyone's complex. Maybe they grew up a certain way, or maybe they had a certain experience in their life that kind of led them down to believe in a certain. I think the more you sit down and talk to somebody, the more you realize people in general tend to want the same things. Right. True. We all want the same things for our families, for ourselves, for our society. We just have different ideas about how to get there. I really believe that on most issues. I think that, and then you could talk about not the what we want, because now we're talking about a commonplace. Right. And it's like, well, hey, I don't think that will get us to our goal, and here's why. And here's what I think. And then you could tell me what you think about it. And it just humanizes the thing better. You're not striking nerves. You're actually having discourse, like you said, and problem solving. And again, if we all want the same thing, why are we all fighting? You know?
Right. So, and I think that all this stuff, when you really think about it, it's cyclical, and that's why I try not to like overreact to a lot of things, because like, look, in general, you're gonna get 8 years of one side, you're about to get another 8 years of the other side, and we've been doing that for long enough that I think we've hit a bit of a bumpy patch because of like the internet aspect of it, and like just how hyper partisan things are. But when you really think about it, like, this is kind of the flow of things, right? Like you give the one side a shot, you're like, I didn't like how you did that. You give the other side a shot, and you're gonna swing back on them too. So I think by recognizing that, like the historical nature of these things, and realizing that we're not very different.
No. But I like you said before, you got those 10% on each side that's real vocal. I think a lot of people are getting wise to media and social media, and realizing that, like, hey, this isn't healthy. We got to step away from this. Like, it can exist, but I think it's in its infancy, right? And we haven't had this for 20 years. It's that young that we're just kind of learning how to. And I think smart people are learning to step away from it, or to see it and know what it is and know what it isn't. Right. And to realize that that's not an accurate depiction of everything. So
that's been kind of my approach, right? Is like, when you see them trying to pull the strings, again, not even saying that like there's some nefarious plot, but like, people have interests, like newspapers want you to read them, websites want you to click them, and they want to see ads. Facebook, same thing. They want you to kind of get mad at that kid from high school because now you're on the site and you're engaging, and so when you recognize that, like, there is an interest in you kind of getting outside of your, your zone, as it were. I think it's been helping me at least to step back and say, this is not important. This is not where I need to, this is not the hill that I need to die on.
Did you watch The Social Dilemma?
I did, yeah.
That should be, when you go to sign up for a Facebook account, that should be mandatory viewing.
Yeah.
Before you sign up. Like, listen, this is what this is how this works.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy that, again, Facebook's not being nefarious with their intentions or the way they design. They're driving engagement.
Yeah.
But it just so happens that people tend to engage in things more that they hate or that anger them.
Mm-hmm.
So, the likes, the comments on that type of content, they're going to feed you more of that. And then if that's what you are thinking the world is all this stuff that you're angry about, that's going to have some negative effects,
Oh, totally. And like you mentioned, like the infancy of it, like with any newer medium, that just happens, right? Like there was a time where radio, they had to figure out, how to regulate that. They had to figure out how to regulate television and stuff like that. We're constantly trying to like strike that balance. And now with the fact that like we can get done with this, I can throw this up, it'll be on the internet, and anyone on the planet could engage with it. That's a new age, man. That's a new thing. And like you said, not every party is nefarious with it. Some people actually are, but like I don't think that when they were putting Facebook together, they were like, we're gonna divide the entire country. Or the
Mark Zuckerberg, like, whoa,
Yeah. But like, look, if your game is, I need you to engage with this product so I can sell or sell whatever it is you're just selling. Yeah, you might make some choices that when it comes down to ethics, it's like a disinterested party should come in and say, all right, here's the rules. Like you can keep doing what you're doing, but here are things that we're going to do to try to protect people. Like something as simple as like a seatbelt, right? It's like, hey, like we have this issue. This helps to stop it to an extent. And like I said, I think that whatever we as a society kind of debate and figure out how to like regulate these things, we'll take some time to figure it out. But I think it is necessary because in its current state, I just think there's a lot of harmful psychological effects coming from social right now.
I think that's blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And while I tend to be not in favor of government intervention in a lot of different things. You bring up seatbelts as a good example. Like we can all agree that's a good thing that those were made mandatory by the government. And I just hope it's a scary thing though to think that the government could now regulate that. I hope they can somehow find a way to do it where they almost, when they just talk about, Facebook and social media platforms have some type of exception where they cannot be held accountable for the things that go on their platform because they're treated like a public utility, right? Or I'm sorry, because they're treated like a news, like the phone company is the analogy that you get, right? But now they're saying, well, that's fine if you're going to leave it open for everybody, right? And you can't be held liable. But now you see where Facebook is, banning the president being the most recent thing. Like, all right, well, now if you're going to pick and choose what does go and doesn't go on your platform, now maybe we need to hold you responsible, right? And like something, I just hope they find a way to regulate it in a way that where too much control doesn't just shift. Because I mean, to me, it's no different if Facebook controls this platform or the government controls the platform.
No, you're right.
I just kind of hope that they're able to do it in a way where it solves the issue without it now becoming monopolized by or all the power being centralized to.
Yeah. There's a way to do it. And I mean, look, I think every solution ends up being in some ways imperfect, but like we get something closer to neutrality because I really do think they're trying, right? But they're also that like I said, the how you put it, the monetary incentive, and in terms of like the tech culture and stuff like that out there. Like there's just different things that aren't going to reflect the views of everyone in the country, right?
Right.
So I hope that they find a way to just make it more consistent, because, like you mentioned, like it's like, okay, you're banning Donald Trump, but you're not banning like a dictator from like this other country that's also messing with their elections. You know what I mean? Like
right,
because they do hypocritical things like that, not intentionally, but they do. It undermines their credibility, and I would hope that if we find a way to regulate this, like what you're saying, we find a way to do it that's a little more like neutral.
Yeah, and it's so hard, right? Because even the most, I've seen it so much in so many different types of areas where the most well-meaning legislation just doesn't solve the problem, or maybe even makes a new problem, and that's why I hope. I don't have a lot of faith in our government, to be honest, to do much.
Yeah.
But I really hope that's one we can figure out, because it's going to be an ongoing issue otherwise.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see where things go, man. Well, I think this has been a really cool combo. I'm gonna have to like go back and watch it and like say, okay, I think that's what we were trying to say there.
Yeah. Again, twice I know I was at least trying to dance around points or make a point that I didn't hit on, but
hey, look,
that's being a person, I guess.
It's being a person, and like I think that it is important for, even if you don't quite have the words for it, I think it's important to try to navigate through it, because if we just like kind of sit back and we're not able to work through that, I don't think that's necessarily like a healthy thing either, right? Like so yeah. I think this was a great conversation.
I appreciate it, man. I'm glad I'm glad you well, happy belated birthday, by the way.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
That's how this kind of came together.
Yeah.
Wishing you happy birthday with that ridiculous photo that
oh, that was a great photo. I was looking back there. I was like, wow, I remember that.
I remember the photo, at least. Yeah. Who else in the photo? Was it
what's her name? Sarah, what was her name?
Okay, that was it. Yeah.
Gymnast, I think.
Those are good times. Those are some good times.
Great times, man.
I love when I try to more, because I fell out of touch with so many people from that era. Every now and again, I just reach out to someone on text or Facebook, Instagram, and just try to keep in touch. But yeah.
Well, I think for us, because like I know you have like a lot of family stuff going on. I think it would be kind of cool, like since you're doing some like the running stuff, if you're ever doing like a challenge, shoot me a text or like a message, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and I think it'd be a nice way for me to catch up again, maybe
yeah, man, that'd be awesome. That would be good.
Get a jog in, But yeah, man, this has been good. John, I don't know. I mean, I know you're not a big social guy, so I don't think you have anything to plug, but
no, I don't. I don't. My life is not that interesting, so
it's more interesting than you think, my friend.
Maybe a little bit. A little bit. Yeah. Once I get once we do get the farm up and running, I mean, I'm not looking to make a killing off it. It's more for my family, but I'll be selling some maybe beef and eggs to the local community too. So
awesome.
Maybe something more to talk about at a later date. So.
Yeah. Once you get that running, if you start doing stuff like that, hit me up. We'll have you back on, and we'll talk about the joys of farming and stuff like that. And dude, look, I hope you and your family are well, safe. Hope you're able to navigate these interesting times. And I can't imagine fatherhood in this environment and trying to like, do your best to like shepherd the youth into through this time.
I don't know what I'm doing. So, I remember the stuff my father taught me and did with me, but yeah, this is different, man. But yeah, we're doing our best. So.
Yeah. And honestly, I think when it's all said and done, you'll get it right, ultimately. So I have faith in you, my friend.
Just try not to mess them up too bad. That's my goal. Yeah.
So, hey, man, thanks a lot, and I'll catch you soon.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. Thanks for having me again.
Hey,